In a flash, he turned me around and began ripping off my shirt, exposing me to the night air. I wince as he takes in the sight of me half naked. Deathly, I feel his hard eyes tracing across every inch of my cowering body. My chest gently rising and falling along to my breathing, white skin rippled in goosebumps. At this, he has the nerve to laugh. "Are you cold?" he asks as I shudder with discomfort. I shook my head slightly, long tufts of hair falling into my face, hiding the fact that I'm close to tears. "No," I lie, doubting that he believes me. But it doesn't matter, I'm about to get the worst
Trigger warning. This story contains some adult themes and has some slightly suggestive, sexual undertones, touching on some masochistic domestic abuse. If these topics are at all triggering for you, I'd suggest finding a different video to spend your time on, and without any further ado, please enjoy a crack in our reality.
I woke up abruptly in a dazed panic, unsure of where I was, or what had happened at first. But my legs ached, as if they had been bent up into a cramped position. My eyes widened in disbelief as I realized that together my unstable father and Peyton, his close friend, the one that owned the body shop, have openly carried me out to the little blue automobile, despite the fact that I'm a fully grown adult, and have boldly dumped me into the back seat in full daylight, as if I were a bag of garbage. I rolled over slightly with a groan, still badly beaten from last night's fight, only to see that they have really done it. They are going to the house, that dreadful abandoned mansion that Father keeps speaking about. Half asleep, I blurrily look around. I'm crammed up against a rather large mountain of cardboard cartons and dingy traveling cases hastily tossed into the car. Clothes, shoes, and other possessions lay littered about me. But the worst part was the alarming amount of things they had brought that didn't even belong here. Light bulbs, hundreds of them, and loose wire laid strewn across my lap, almost as if somebody had ripped out all of our electricity from the entire house and brought it along. Christmas tinsel and baubles, even my little sister's glass angels, they've stolen everything. Bubble lights and my mother's brightly colored balls sat in enormous piles, all of it broken. There's so much of it that it's overwhelming, and we're in the middle of July. "No," I whimper out as Peyton turned in his seat to look at me, those steel gray-green eyes sliding off of me, as if I'm some kind of prey ready to be caught and eaten alive. I swallowed hard, attempting to calm myself, but it's difficult to remain indifferent, so my hands begin to tremble visibly as he watches. "Oh, Quinn," he says, seeing my scarred eyes. "There's really no need for you to be frightened of us, but there is reason," I think discreetly to myself, lifting timid eyes to his boyish face. "They've ripped out all the house's lights and have taken the chimney pipes as well. You know we aren't going to hurt you, right?" He waits coolly for my response. "No, I know," I answered him, struggling to keep my voice level. "Why would they take the pipes out?" I thought, why are they doing all this? How can I act as if everything's going to be all right when it isn't? My mother got away last night, taking the 2 younger little girls with her, but what will become of me? I don't know who they are, but there are others living amongst us, things that look like humans but aren't. They feed off of our energy without anyone knowing it, devouring our souls behind our backs. They crave and chase after the darkest parts of humanity as if it were a narcotic, enjoying our pain, fear, and unhappiness the best, because it is the closest thing to evil that they can get. You might think you've just developed a cold or the sniffles afterwards, but it's actually a side effect from being fed off of. Once a long time ago, when I was a child, I dashed into my principal's office without permission at school. I came across him merely by accident, but inside the man was just standing there waiting for me, and he wasn't wearing a face. Looking back on it now, I do believe that he did it deliberately, enjoying the terror it brought to me. But of course nobody would believe the snot-nosed little kid, and so after many years' time slowly eradicated those fears, and I nearly forgot. But from time to time I'm kept up at night, wondering if what I saw was truly real after all. There was the time before that when I was playing in the garden and came across a man standing behind our barn in the tall grass. I can't remember if he spoke to me or not, but I had the distinct sense that he was not a man, but something else. Now I think this thing that has been stalking me for years has come back. I think he might be Peyton. Ever since this mysterious stranger has been coming around, I can sense a bad change in our family. "Here, drink this," Peyton says, holding out a thermos of coffee, quickly drawing me out of my dark thoughts. "You must be thirsty," he says. "Yes, I'm thirsty, and I'm hungry too. I'm starving, but it's not like you'd care," I thought bitterly. Peyton raised an eyebrow, and I timidly reached for the thermos, suppressing the ache of boiling emotions. "Thank you," I answered him politely. "It's cold and black as battery acid, but I take a tentative sip. I tried to keep you awake, but you insisted on sleeping." Peyton says, "But you'll be all right, son." Father puts in, helpfully speaking up for the first time. His voice sounded strained and foreign. "I think Peyton's been feeding off of me. This makes me feel sleepy, as if I'm going to pass out, but I don't. Barely conscious, I am made to endure the pins and needles sensation that drifts through my weakened body until he's satisfied. I can't tell anyone because no one will hear me. Father doesn't listen anymore." Miserably, I take another shuddering gulp of coffee, almost immediately choking on it as the strong liquid makes its way down. The snug grin on Peyton's face broadening at this. Father insists upon keeping him around despite my mother's loud objections. But I know that he's bad news. Rumor has it that Peyton was involved in a used parts shop, delivering bodies to those that use their innards for experiments and illegal operations. This thought makes my blood run cold. Peyton looks like the kind of fellow that would kill someone just to butcher them up for money. He'd draw them in first with his reassuring smile and good looks. Then he'd roll up his sleeves, exposing hardened muscular arms, put on an apron, and draw out an axe to chop you up with. His wide grin turning into a merciless smirk as he watched you die bleeding out onto his floor. Sometimes I wonder if I too am going mad, because occasionally I'll see things in the dark when I'm left alone in the closet for too long. Yes, they lock me up. Recently they have turned to keeping me hidden away at nights for long hours at a time. Sometimes the only person I see for days is Peyton when he comes to feed me or change the newspapers. He has to do it because Father often forgets I'm even there. I've become conditioned into dependent on him in a way, relying on Peyton to take care of me. Father says it's for my own good to be locked up when they are working, but I don't understand why they need to do it. As you'd expect from such treatment, I've become almost completely detached, as if the world I live in is not real, as though I'm slipping through the reality of things. Burly holding on, I feel like I'm hovering outside of my own body. I'd do almost anything to feel something, and Peyton knows this, I'm afraid. He uses neglect and punishment to keep me complicit. It makes me melt when he looks at me, and I don't know why. Maybe I'm in love with him, but I hope not. And there's something else. One day I just woke up and things had changed now. Regrettably, I too crave pain and self-inflicted wounds like a drug. It can mostly be managed, but the other half of the time I drive myself crazy wanting, no needing to hurt myself, using any means possible to inflict the satisfying rush of save-air anguish onto myself, with very little reason as to why. I know soon I'll need a doctor, but it might be too late then. Sometimes I fantasize about being tied up and beaten against my will. Often Peyton is the one doing this to me, whipped until I'm shaken and unable to stand. Hurt so badly that I can't do anything but to cower away from my belt-wielding tormentor, crying brokenly until it washes the pain away. On other occasions, I feel myself want to step out in front of moving cars or throw myself off of bridges. The drive is so strong that I feel as if I'll scream myself hoarse. But then the thought of what I'm about to do always stops me from going through with it. However, the real scariest part to all of this is a side of me knows that I'm stuck inside of an invisible cycle, trapped in some sort of loop that runs around and around endlessly, playing with me, but I can't understand it well enough to escape, or even to be certain that it is real. I look down and gasp. Without thinking, I've drawn out my pocket knife and am holding the blade out, hovering over my shaking open palm. Quickly, I shove it away, turning to see if anyone has noticed. But they are clearly preoccupied with the road. Wistfully, I study Father's clouded expression. Once, a long time ago, he was a good man, kind to everyone, and pretty well off. But then, the banks closed with his money on the inside. Slowly, the man I used to love and respect began to crumble inwardly. He spoke about running away from things, kept to himself often, and only came out of his heavily paneled study to secure a little food, or to tell us grand stories about a house he used to know. This place was a tragic, forgotten mansion somewhere far away, with beautiful big windows and a wide gray porch. It was painted pink and had thick, broad shutters and huge trees guarding it. At first, this didn't seem strange. It was just a house, nothing more. But soon we realized that he had developed some kind of odd attachment to it. It was all he thought about, all he dreamed of. Soon, all he did day in and day out was talk about going back there to see it all again. And this began to seem strange. It wasn't just a house anymore. It was a fantasy. Now I guess he has finally done it, I think, resting my arms against the car window ledge. Father blows his nose loudly into a pocket handkerchief and brings his face away from the cloth smeared in a black, slimy substance. I gag at the sight and tumble sideways as he takes the car violently over another series of huge potholes in the street. He's losing his mind, I think, mildly disturbed. Father's burly dressed himself today and doesn't look as if he's slept in weeks. Peyton, too, seems sleep-deprived and pale, as if he knows something he doesn't want to share with the rest of us. His gorgeous blue-gray eyes has dark shadows under them, and he seems detached. Maybe he's fighting his own demons, I think quietly to myself. Please. I finally get up the courage to ask. Please tell me you're not really going to that place. Just keep quiet back there. Father responds annoyed. I turn away and looked out of the smeared car window. We were already so far away, at least halfway through the city, I noted. Late in the evening, my mother had left for the last time. Shoving over plush parlor chairs and breaking lamps, she'd screamed that she hated old dirty houses and could never see herself living in such a place. Eerily, I'd stood by and watched her collect all her prized rich furs and jewels. The last words she had spoken to me was that a boy belonged with his father. But the ugly truth was that she was afraid of him, just like I was. Sadly, in this day and age, it's not really a thing for married folks to get a divorce. However, quietly vanishing is not unheard of. But lately, everyone is more concerned with the great crash of the banks than what people are doing with their own marriages. Just weeks earlier, I'd overheard Mother confide in a close family friend that she was afraid of her husband, that she thought that he might be growing crazy, driven mad over the edge because of losing most of our money in the stock crisis. I shouldn't be here, I told myself. I should have been attending college like the other boys from my grade. But no, of course, Peyton advised my father to have me wait and enroll into a better school. An imaginary school, I thought, turning bleakly away from the window. After I dropped out of school, things had gone from bad to worse. This is when they'd started locking all the doors and windows. I'd been forced to pack up most all of the house under gunpoint, stirring my mother to flee. I brush a loose strand of hair out of my face and blankly study the rust-encrusted outline of chrome placed on the inside of the car floor. You know Quinn, Peyton says, lighting up a cigarette. We couldn't have just left you there. What did you expect us to do with you? I look up at him quickly. I would have stayed behind. I spit back at him, angry because I know he's just trying to get a rise out of me. Hell, I'd rather live off the streets than to go live in that awful place. I could have. Hey, watch your tone, Peyton interrupts, spewing an enormous cloud of smoke into my face with a nasty sparkle of amusement. Angrily, I shift in my seat. He's enjoying every bit of this, I thought. Well, you can't make me go, I yell back at him. Then, without thinking, I lurched forward, a hand darting out to stupidly open the moving car door. Anything would be better than remaining trapped with this pair. But just in time, Peyton catches hold of me and shoves a hand firmly against my chest. "Get back here," he barked. Slowly, his sharp fingernails sink into my skin through my thin shirt, which stops me effectively. "I think I can keep you here if I want," he says, pushing me back into my seat. "Hey, hey, hey," Father yells, straining to see what's happening. Peyton drops his cigarette with a curse and raised up a hand to hit me with, but stops when he sees the look on my face as I'm expecting a blow. "All right, I'm only going to say this once. Don't try that shit again with me," he growls warningly, his patience worn thin. "I don't want to have to tie you up. You're going with us, and it doesn't matter whether you want to or not." He opens a shiny case and produced a new cigarette. "Come on, your father needs you," he coaxed, placing cold gray-green eyes on my miserable figure. For a brief instant, I squirm under his steady gaze, as he silently dared me to cross him. But I remained silent and looked down at the dust-covered floor mats. Peyton turned to relighting his cigarette. "And just for that, you get no dinner either." Father calls back to me, even though he knows that I haven't eaten since yesterday. "No food for you, not until you're ready to be a part of this family, you hear me?" I nod painfully. Do I make myself clear? Father slowed the car as if meaning to stop and get out. Glancing into the rearview mirror, he scowls at what he sees. He always says that. I'm a pathetic excuse for a son, too scrawny for my age. My clothes don't fit me right. How could I ever turn out to be a real gentleman? I try hard to sit up straighter, crossing my arms over my skinny chest to hide how small I am. But it doesn't seem to help much. "Did you hear, rat?" he shouts, making me jump. "Yes, sir," I blurt out. "Good boy, then behave yourself and maybe I won't have to tell Peyton here to give you another thrashing." My face heats up at this. He has no idea how badly I do want Peyton to beat me. I want to feel alive so badly that inwardly, I'd almost welcome a stiff flogging, even though I knew it was wrong. Nervously, I begin to bite my nails, driven crazy by the thought of Peyton whipping me. He'd make sure that it would hurt, I thought, red-faced. My eyes flick up to rest on Peyton for an agonizing moment. He looks back at me and I catch my breath hastily. Looking away, his sly smile of pleasure eating holes into my aching heart. No, stop it, stop feeling this. I scold myself, cowering down lower in my seat, ashamed. Father scratched at his graying beard and turns his faded car slowly down a narrow side street that would eventually take us out of the hot, dusty city and through the tall countryside. Even though it's summer outside, sunny and bright with large sunbeams dancing across the road, I feel chilled. I glance around in search of a blanket to cover up with, but of course they hadn't even bothered to pack me any of my things. The only clothes I have is the ones I'm wearing. "It can't be long now, son." Father finally spoke up from in front, taking the car almost drunkenly over another rather sharp turn in the drive, sending the boxes and trunks to slam violently into me, bringing forth a great big horrible cracking sound from within. "You're China soldiers," I gasp out, attempting to grab as many packages as I could, surely to receive a stern lecture if even one of his treasured little men was to get damaged, after I had so painstakingly wrapped up each one. But Father didn't even turn to in his seat to look. Later, daylight steadily began to fade into evening and the small reassuring cities and towns became fewer and farther between. Peyton nor Father said very much anymore. Presently, Father pulled the car off the main road and drove along a long, winding drive for some time, past muddy cow pastures and swampy ponds. This unattractive little strip of countryside wasn't even paved, but consisted of hard-packed dirt. The grass on each side of the road grew up almost as tall as the abandoned fences that lay out for miles. But as far as I could see, there was no livestock of any kind grazing in the hazy meadows, dappled with the sun-setting streaks of red and gold. When I was a boy, Father began cheerfully, doing his best to lift our spirits. My father would lead me away with him down this lonely road and onto Star Valley Drive, where he'd point out a very old weathered farmhouse. Here we go again. I think now he's going to tell us all about his beautiful house for the 100th time. Quinn. Yes, I snapped forward. Peyton's turned back to me, glaring daggers. His shirt's been unbuttoned and he's pulled off his tie and vest. For Pete's sake, listen when your father is speaking. He knocks clouds of ash off of his 10th cigarette. His shirt's partially pulled open, revealing an inappropriate amount of bare skin. It's disrespectful to daydream when your elders are talking. He scolds as I try not to look, even though I want to. Glumly, I mumbled out some kind of awkward excuse and struck up an exaggerated listening pose, faking wholehearted interest. But underneath, I hate them. I hate Peyton for teasing me like this, and I'm afraid of the pit in my stomach, warning me to escape from them before it's too late. This was the kind of place where folks turned up their noses to, Father said, turning to Peyton. With its crumbling window shutters and flaking pink paint stains. The building hadn't been lived in for over 30 years, you see. We didn't know why, but the house and farm had been abandoned, with nobody to care if it caved in on itself or not. But somehow, miraculously, it always seemed to have one light on, burning day and night in the entryway. Left to sit by itself and wait for years and years, rotting as it did so. Wait for what? Peyton asked softly, fingering the cigarette between parted lips. We never knew, Father replied. But if one was to draw up close enough, you'd develop a tickling, strange kind of fear mixed with a sense that you needed to help it. Nervously, I fidgeted, hands in my pockets. If this wreck was abandoned, maybe it was left behind for a good reason. You wanted to make things all better in a way, Father said dreamily. But the house with those oh-so-dark windows looking down at your Introshin made you hesitant to go up any closer. What did it feel like? Peyton asked quietly, almost in a whisper. The two of them were making me nervous, I thought. Like nothing else in the world mattered anymore. Father admitted in all honesty. Slowly the sun began to set, and here and there stood patches of oak trees clustered together, gathering darkness beyond their branches. Before we knew it, night had descended upon us. I shivered as the smallest bits of moonlight struggled to peer down at us through the clouds in the night sky, painting the road in front of us into a bewitching hazy blue color, and my imagination began to run wild, conjuring up fantasies of things moving between the gnarled, twisted trees. Perhaps if there were lights or even a few scattered houses, it wouldn't feel so lonely, I told myself. In the city, they always had cozy street lamps. You'd see a few cars and there'd be people, but out here. My eyes widened as the weeds beside the road rippled suddenly in the breeze, and deathly long fingers of darkness reached out to us and made me start in my seat. We could be killed out here, I thought, gazing down at my hands, shadowy and small in the dark, murdered on this winding back road, and nobody mightn't find us or days. With the Great Depression came desperate people. They were often called hobos, jobless, starving men that wouldn't think twice about jumping you if they got the chance. Suddenly a new thought entered my head. What if Peyton or Father were the ones to murder me? Hadn't they already come close to it once? At one point, Peyton produced a tattered map and pored over its contents with a dark frown growing across his young face. He never said anything, however. He just strained at it in the dim light and watched the road for signs that weren't here anymore. Father rolled down his window and a cool summer's night breeze blew into our stuffy car. It's not here, I tell you, Peyton gradually exclaims, tossing down the faded map. What I mean, it's gotta be here. Father huffed gruffly. Give it to the kid in the back. You probably can't read that tiny print. Sure I can, you just own an outdated map. No, it's good as new. Angrily, Peyton shoves the great wad of map papers back into my lap. What's it say, son? Father asks impatiently. I don't know, I can't read it. We'll try harder, but I can't. Frustrated, I look down at the sorry sight of water-stained paper, and it's impossible to make out in this lighting. Stop your complaining. We're lost. Peyton lets out heatedly. No. We aren't, you're just stupid. I cower as the hoo-hoo-hoo of a great horned owl sounds from somewhere close by. I turn my head quickly and just barely make out the owl as we pass his fallen tree stump. I look at him and see huge orange eyes glare at us. He's probably upset that we've bothered his kingdom of solitude, I thought to myself, disturbing him in the middle of his silent night's watch. Then I saw the dark outline of what looked like an abandoned red barn. Gradually it looms up ahead of us, nestled into the brush of the woods. Why didn't you stop at a blaming hotel? Peyton growls, evidently tired of this nonsense. Because, you idiot, I thought that this shortcut would take us there before we'd have to stop. My calculations showed me that we should have made it there before dark. Peyton sighed heavily, throwing up his hands. Well, your effing calculations were wrong. Quinn, Father barks back at me. Yes. Tell me where we are. He doesn't know that, Richard. Peyton puts in. Or we'd be out of here by now. We'll keep on trying anyways, Father orders. Can't you just turn around? No, nobody's turning around tonight. Father's hands begins to tremble at the wheel as if he half believed that Peyton might try to overpower him and drive himself. Then, without warning, Father pulls out a pistol from his pocket, making both Peyton and I start in our seats. Hey, that's not necessary. Peyton speaks up quickly as Father lays the gun down on top of his lap protectively. I told you, we're going to find this bleeding town if it's the last thing I do. The sound of his icy voice makes my insides get queasy. Come on, take it easy. Peyton tries to console him. No, you fing bastard. Don't tell me to take it easy, I won't stop until... Then why don't we at least pull over for the night? Peyton suggested. No, I cry out, afraid. This whole area feels dead and it's giving me the chills every time I look back over my shoulder. All I see is black, as if the world's only showing us what we're currently looking at. Well, I think it's a good idea. Father eventually agrees, putting his gun back into his pocket. We'll just pull over and wait it out until morning. But what if something's out there? I whine, stiffening in my seat. Both Peyton and Father look at one another, then burst out into raucous laughter. Nothing's out there, don't be ridiculous. What do you mean, what if something's out here? Peyton asks. My God, look at you. Peyton exclaims, turning fully around in his seat to stare at me. You're a little scaredy cat. I never could have guessed. Hey, lay off him. Father stopped the car near some blotchy bushes. Get a grip, city boy. You're shaking like a leaf. Peyton got up and stretched his legs with a groan. I just don't feel safe. Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you. Father interrupts, getting up himself and glancing around at the long shadows that stretch out across the ground. But I'm afraid there are no wild animals out here tonight, waiting to make you their dinner. Turning on a headlamp, he turned to pop open the trunk, rummaging around until he finds a battered lawn chair. Quinn? Peyton comes around to my side of the car, bad glint in his eyes. He started drinking. Yes? I query, stiffening, looking up at him, as Peyton leans against the car and folds his arms, merely a tall, dreamy shadow in the dark. He looks down and I shiver subconsciously, catching a slight humming sound ringing in my ears, and it's coming from him somehow. Why don't you be a very good young man and fetch us some firewood? He snickers disagreeably. And try not to get eaten up by anything while you're doing it. No, I utter out, convinced that he's only making me do this because of my fear of the dark. I can't, I pleaded, touring to look out at the gloom, murky with the dark shapes of old trees and things. Peyton scowled at the woods as if nothing could possibly scare him. Come on, yes you can. He runs a hand through his gelled tufts of glossy hair, and my heart melts a little bit at the sight of his fingers tangled in those blonde waves. He catches me watching and stops mid-motion as if aware of what I'm thinking. Hey now, he cracks a sly, all-knowing little smile. It's not that bad. His tone growing ever so soft. Please don't make me, I say, my hands sweating. Please don't make me, Peyton. He mocks teasingly in a sing-song voice, my face colored. Come on now, be a good boy and get Peyton some wood. He patted me on the shoulder dismissively as if I'm a child and turns to walk away when I blurt out a decided no. He stops and turns to see me balled up on the seat in the car. What? Peyton's eyes sharpened. I'm not going, I said firmly, shocking myself by my own boldness. I want to keep him here, keep him talking why I couldn't say, but I hoped he'd take the bait. You heard me. My voice sounded small, but I didn't back down. You can't make me, I stated defiantly, wrapping thin arms around my knees, my body beginning to scream for the abuse I craved. Are you telling me no? He asks, those sharp gray eyes tearing me apart. Yes, I replied, wondering what he'd do next. Please, you're just being lazy. Listen to yourself. Be a man for once in your life and show us that you have some balls, for Christ's sakes. He taunted, grabbing my arm in an attempt to make me mind him, but I jerked myself free, wanting to force him to get upset with me, wanting to get him mad enough to hit me even. I said, no, go get your own damn firewood, I shout, crawling backwards into the pile of boxes and junk in their car, pleased with the look of rage that crosses his face. What did you say? Father slammed the trunk shut and turned to see Peyton coming after me. You know what? I think you need to be taught a little lesson in respect. Peyton snarls, pulling me away from the safety of the luggage. I think it's time you get put back into your place. He spits, gripping my shoulders tighter so I can't run. No, get away from me, let go. I shriek, adrenaline beginning to pound through me at his rough treatment. I think we need to beat some obedience into your scrawny little ass. Peyton yelled, wrestling my hands behind my back so I can't fight him. Go ahead, he said, dragging me onto the ground. Cry. I know you've wanted this all day. He whispers this close to my ear so Father doesn't hear, and I let out a weak sob as he twists my arm. No, you don't know anything about me, I scream as his arms encircle my waist. I feel his breath hit my cheek, sending tingles to reverberate through me. Do you want to scream? He asks as I fight against him helplessly. Because you can scream as loud as you want. Forcefully, he slammed me forward against the hood of the car, and I begin to shiver with anticipation, giving up to him as he's much stronger than me. I just needed to get hurt, and hurt badly. From out of his pocket, Peyton produced some rope as I lay bent over. My eyes widen. Is he going to tie me up? I question myself, tantalized by the idea of being held helplessly for him to use. Out of the corner of my eye, I see Father settle down his lawn chair on the other side of the car in the dark, well out of view of us. Finally, all my shame from before has gone for the moment. Right now, all I'm craving is a harsh distraction, and Peyton was making my body begin to throb with excitement. In a flash, he turned me around and began ripping off my shirt, exposing me to the night air. I wince as he takes in the sight of me half naked. Deathly, I feel his hard eyes tracing across every inch of my cowering body. My chest gently rising and falling along to my breathing, white skin rippled in goosebumps. At this, he has the nerve to laugh. Are you cold? He asks as I shudder with discomfort. I shook my head slightly, long tufts of hair falling into my face, hiding the fact that I'm close to tears. No, I lie, doubting that he believes me. But it doesn't matter, I'm about to get the worst flogging of my life, and nobody is here to stop him. Good, Peyton says, proceeding to tie my wrist. Obediently, I stand still and let myself be stripped further, then bound tightly. The rope gives my wrists a minor rope burn, and I let out a little gasp. But it felt good more my head begged. Shh, he snapped, swatting my cheek. Did I give you permission to speak? He asked in a good acting voice. His eyes heavy with aggression that made me want to die. I knew that this creature wasn't human. Nobody could make you feel the way he could. But by now I could tell that he wasn't going to go easy on me. But I was glad in a ducked up way. I didn't want him to care whether he hurt me or not. I wanted to be forced to my limits. I wanted the wall between us to break. I needed him to beat me until I was numb, or until I couldn't stand. I wanted to be forced to forget about everything I'd went through. "Sorry," I murmured, trying to smile. "Knock that smile right off your face," he said in a raised voice. "You're getting punished." I hung my head and did as he said. "Just for that, you get tied up tighter." I wriggled, naked and waiting for him as he just laughed. "Look at you, a tied-up little piggy. Are you ready to get the wood yet, or do I have to give you a little bit more?" "No." I closed my eyes as he took a wild swing at me, slapping my chest with a crack that echoed off the woods around us. I winced, but didn't cry at the sting. I've taken worse and I wanted it. Right now I could take a whole fucking lot harder. I wanted to be beat nearly senseless. I wanted him to make me limp. "Ah, is that not good enough for you?" He saw the look on my face and left for a moment. As I watch, he picks up a hefty stick from off the ground and comes back over. Then he's using the stick to hit me with, swinging it back, and then brought it down across my back and shoulders, with such force that the whole dark woods echo louder than before, with the sound of the deepening crack. The sickening pain is overwhelming and immediate, forcing me to cry out, this time without meaning to. "Are you a baby?" Peyton scolds close to my face, lifting my chin with the tip of his finger, so I'm forced to look at him. "I haven't even gotten started, and you're already crying." Peyton removed the loose hair falling into my eyes and peers closely at my blotchy face. "Look at you." He misses my back this time and caught my bare shoulders with the blow, making me scream this time because the ringing in my ears is unbearable. "You're such an ugly mess. I can't believe I'm even wasting my time on you." Bitterly, I choke on a strange sob. "Then why are you?" I ask, my voice low and husky. I want to know why he persists with me like this. Why does he care? "Because I can't help myself, see." Peyton huffed, letting into me all the harder, as if he's upset with himself and is taking it out on me instead. I jerked forward and writhed as he presses a hand against my open mouth, stilling me momentarily and soothing my cries. "Hush, be quiet now, Quinn." He wiped a tear away from my swollen cheeks. "We don't want Daddy to hear you crying like a little girl, do we?" He fakes kindness, and I nod, then shake my head. "No," I get out. "Good, now shut up. You wanted this, now you're getting it." He hit me with the stick and smiled at the great show of effort I made to remain silent. He turned me so my back was facing upwards further. He hit and beat me more. I struggled to somewhat quiet, but part of the time he had to cover my mouth with one hand, sealing off my hollow cries. But soon he grew tired of the stick and took off his belt to use instead, coiling it up as I shatteringly watched, already trembling from the huge welts I had already sustained. I winced fearfully, knowing that this was going to hurt like hell, the suspense killing me. "Ah," a whimper was forced from my lips as he let into my ass this time without any mercy, bringing the belt down into my bare skin with a smarting smack. "Smile," he says in a low voice, "and thank me for punishing you." "Thank you," I hear myself say from far away. Somehow it almost felt good. The force administered was shocking, and I struggled to hold in all sounds of discomfort, but it was almost impossible to stay quiet, and I wanted more badly. "Thank you for punishing me." I winced forward, began to drip down as the belt was used to beat me past what I could bear. At one point I stopped crying. I just wanted the pain to wash everything else away, and I had so much of it that I felt I needed more. I wanted the cruel blows to beat every last feeling out of me. I felt him grip my hair and drag me up to stand on tiptoes draped across the side of the hood, with most of my weight relying on it to keep me balanced. Tears and snot ran down my face as the abuse increased. I was growing hard now and making tiny moaning sounds. Just not wanting him to stop, I felt like I deserved so much more and harder. My ass was hot now from the flogging and beginning to swell up a little bit, growing puffy and red like my face from the rain of blows to the same spot. "What's wrong, Quinn?" He covered my mouth and nose with a large hand, cutting off my air. "Can't you take it anymore?" I sputtered. "Speak up, I'm all ears." I can't breathe. Then you'd better beg me to stop, never, I thought. He was doing it on purpose now, I think numbly, beating me on the same spot until I struggled to scream under his hand. Now, I want you to count them, Peyton announces, slowing down his strokes. Then maybe next time you'll think twice about acting out with Mamo. He raised up the belt and I hung forward against the car, my arms outstretched in front of me. Harshly, he brought the belt down and I sucked in a pained shriek. Come on, Quincy, I said, count them. Peyton coiled up his belt a second time and I bit my lower lip with a frightened little shiver. 1, I sobbed out, burying my head into my arms. Good, keep going. T2, whack, I jerked forward. Fuck, 3, F4, and on until he was satisfied. Finally, Peyton cut my wrists free and I caved to my knees, reeling from the severity, placing sweating hands on the damp ground. It was nearly too dark to see, but I was almost certain that Peyton was smiling at me, enjoying my pain and not even trying to conceal it anymore. Fucking bastard. Come here, you little shit. Peyton reached for me and I flinched away. Relax, he says, softer this time. It's all over now. I'm done. He takes my arm and I let out a pitiful sob. Here now. He pats my cheek and I slump sideways, left unstable and wobbly. Peyton stood back and studied my shivering body with a grin of satisfaction. You will be fine. Come here. Peyton pulled me towards him, out a little bit further into the dense brush, shielding us from view, and through a bush of briars that all catch at my bare skin and exposed arms and legs. I knew what was coming next. He was going to feed off of some of that shit show that he just inflicted, but I don't care anymore. Everything inside had melted out of my reach. He crouched over my slouched body and stooped to pick thorns off of my bleeding arms. Shh. He comforted as the distant feeling of pins and needles entered my bloodstream, making me wince. Somehow I knew that this was coming the whole damn time, but now that he was actually feeding, the intense fear of it had eased slightly. All I could truly focus on was the sharp welts of his belt reverberating through me again and again, as if he were still doing it. Peyton let out a low sound of enjoyment, and I closed my eyes, my knees buckling out from under me, unable to hold me up with the exertion, so I fell over dizzily, dripping snot from my nose mixed with hot tears that stunned my burning cheeks. Peyton planted a firm kick into my ribs, making me ball up on the ground. Stay still, you little crap. I feel spit hit my face. Unless you want Peyton to start over again. He barked in a stern voice, only this time his threats had little effect on me. He could have pointed a gun to my temple, and I wouldn't so much as blink in response. Again, he drives a foot into my chest and I'm jerked backwards. Maybe it will kill me this time, I think numbly. I just can't feel my legs. I think it's never been this bad. I can see blurry stars and butterflies twinkling and dancing all in a rainbow in front of my face. Stay awake. Peyton coursed me as hot shivering waves begin to pound against my head. The beatings left me disassociated and hollow, a shell of a person, but nobody's home. Quinn, open your eyes. He kicked me harder, a little louder. Stay awake. I can't. I try to say through the heavy sleepiness that feels as though it's trying to drag me down into the ground. Peyton's hands grip my hair and he cups my face, checking for a pulse. Stay awake. But this goes on for so long that I start to actually believe that I'm falling and I don't fight it. Black spots take the place of the butterflies and gradually my vision sank into almost nothing, at which point Peyton must have decided that I had had enough and couldn't handle anymore. All right, now get some wood. He pushes me off of him. And don't come back without IT. He barked, but I just lay there in a huddled up little pile. Get up, he shouts. So I try my best to comply as he sits back and watches me struggle to stand on my own. I turned away from him, weak from hunger, and fight the urge to not immediately crumble again. Get it now. I don't care if you're hurt, Peyton full out yells. Shocked that I could even move, I limped off into the direction our car came from, as it was the more familiar terrain. Shakily I leaned down to pick up shreds of my clothes. Peyton strolled away, buckling back on his belt. I watched him saunter over to where my father sat and heard the two of them begin laughing together. They're talking about me, I think. Blurrily, I stare out at the dark, trying desperately to see, but my eyes are having a hard time adjusting to the faint, hazy light. It feels alive out here, as if there are eyes everywhere just watching me. Each brush I creep past shivers with little sounds, making me begin to tiptoe, painfully aware of every step I take. I sniffled and continued searching the ground for wood, clutching my hands together, but the rustling in the brush just grows louder. I dart past a large black shape alongside the road and glance over my shoulder to see if anything is following me. But it's only large empty space behind back there, so I quietly continue. But the further away from the car I walk, the more unsettled I became. Slowly I drift past a grove of new trees and stop to search the bed of leaves for fallen branches, straining to make out anything burnable. It was as if my skin was on fire, and besides that, there was a deadening ache in the background. After every pounding, throbbing wave, it hits me all over again. Running up along my spine nearly sends me doubled over. I didn't know that trees creaked and moaned at night for no reason, I think. Suddenly I see it, another clump of trees a way off, farther down the road. Painfully, I crawled back up to see the red barn again about half a mile down the road. Maybe some kind farmer has forgotten a pile of stacked firewood in there, or at the very least I might find some odds and ends worth burning. As I trudge forward, the crickets begin to chirp up louder in the woody meadows, and a great deal of fireflies flicker and dance in the open field off in the distance. Now that it's a bit brighter outside, I can see a broken-down wooden cart sitting beside a fence line. It's painted a faded white color, and there's a weedy apple tree as well off somewhere close to the enormous barn, weighed down with fruit. My stomach gives an angry turn of hunger, and I wonder if the fruit is any good. Would they be sweet and juicy? Or tart? I slink up closer to the property and notice a muddy creek resting peacefully off to my left, deep within its green waters. A few bullfrogs speak up cheerfully to one another, chorusing a great deal of different pitches of songs. It's almost as if they're singing, I thought, approaching the fruit tree. "Hello," I call out. "Is anyone here?" I stop enlisting, not really expecting anyone to respond before reaching out to pick an apple off the tree. It feels rubbery in my hands and tastes dry, but I gladly eat another bite, driven on by hunger. It's terrible and full of seeds, but I don't care. I can't stop. After I'm 2 apples in, I begin to realize that I'm not devouring apples at all, but that they are some tart kind of other fruit. Soon I've finished another one. Then I look around guiltily after filling my pockets. It's time to get the wood, I tell myself sternly, starting for the open haymow door. The slider's left hanging open towards the back, and a mound of hill rises up to the doors like a clever bridge. Still futilely, I climb the little rise and curiously peer inside, almost prepared to turn and run away. The moldy barn is missing huge bits of its roof and smells like rotting straw. The stench is strong and makes me need to sneeze. I take a careful step inside, mindful of the dark spots. The space is almost black in here, and I blink several times, attempting to let my eyes adjust to the grayness. There's a distant sound of pigeons in the ceiling rafters getting spooked away, frightened into flight, that causes me to glance up quickly, but it's nothing. Slowly I fumble blindly and hold out my hands in which to feel my way forward. Some large flurry animal waddles quickly away, and I believe I can see its small brood of baby raccoons following her to a safer part of the barn, screeching angrily at me as they tumble away behind a bale of hay. The wooden floor beneath me creaks sorrowfully, and I jump sideways, feeling it cave a bit under my weight. I think I can see a pile of old glass windows leaning against the furthest side, along with some boxes of household belongings. The wet wood floor shifts again, and I stumble across it, catching sight of a huge broken mirror standing up against the back wall. I squint at it, thinking that I saw something shimmering in the faint light, and nearly trip over a rusty grass cutter parked off to the side. Again, I look over at the mirror and freeze, seeing myself in its tarnished reflection, but also something else. I stop and stare, frozen. It wasn't a person, but seemed more like a huge bubbling mass that moved like a poor imitation of a man. The thing was there for a few chilling seconds behind me in the doorway, as if it wanted to sneak up on me. Then it vanished without a trace, fading away inside out. With a terrified shriek, my feet collapsed through the moldy floor, and I felt myself sink through the soggy wood. "Help!" I cry out, throwing my arms sideways to catch myself, stopping the fall. My chest wedged, firmly stuck halfway up and halfway down. Frantically, I kicked about, legs flailing beneath me wildly as I dangled between two sections, trying to fell anything I could stand on to hoist myself back up. But there was nothing. Stupidity, I glanced down to scream in horror. The barn's bottom half is simply non-existent. What should have been a basement half, where I suppose cattle might once have been bedded down, stood heart-stoppingly empty. All I saw was a harsh, bleached whiteness for a whole split second. Just the vague outline was visible to me, as if it weren't real at all, but a drawing done out in pencil. All color, texture, and details were none rendered, as if I had fallen right through the world. Screaming, I closed my eyes. It's not real, I said about in a shaky voice, my mind nearly shutting down on itself, unable to process it all. What if I fell down into it? I suddenly agonized, taunted by the mere proximity to it. Would I simply cease to exist? Ow, I whimpered out, knowing that soon I would be unable to hold myself up for much longer. "Open your eyes," my brain cried. "You have to help yourself. You have to get up." But I'm afraid. I sobbed, my lips quivering. I didn't think that I could bear to see that awful, empty whiteness again. Not without losing my mind first. "Move, you fool, before it's too late." No. Tears began to cut long lines in the dust and dirt on my face as I sobbed. My hands weakened, gripping the wood. Then I felt the prick of nails catch and begin to cut into my palms. Suddenly, Peyton's kneeling by my side, hushing me. "Quinn," I heard his soothing voice in my ear as he tries to quit me. "Can you hear me?" I open my eyes and wail at the sight of him. Urgently, the man crouches next to me and tried scooping a strong arm under me, but I don't feel his touch at all, only a vacant, hollow sensation. Blankly, I begin to choke on ugly sobs beyond consoling, frightened that something's wrong with me. "Hey," Peyton tugs on my waist, but I'm too stuck to move. "Come on, Quinn, it's gonna be all right. Hold on to me, you need to be brave." "No," I say, shaking my head. "I can't be brave this time. The bottom of the barn, Peyton, it's missing," I rambled. "It's all gone. The world's trying to swallow me up. I can feel it." Frantically, I clutch the wood around me. No, it's not," Peyton says, preoccupied, trying again to lift me out of the broken wood that has me wedged between it like a mouse trap. Suddenly, I realize the barn's closed up tightly around my waist, holding me so I can't get free. I'm going to die, aren't I? I cry, placing bloody hands on both sides of the wood and jerking myself back and forth in a vain attempt to free myself. It's trying to get me to let go. I continue. "Don't be crazy, you're going to be fine." Peyton groans, peeling me out as he speaks, but I can feel his attempts growing weaker. "I'm not ready to die," I tell him between coughing. "Just be brave for me," but I can't. "Yes, you can, come on." He lifted again slightly, and I marvel at the complete lack of feeling in my body. Peyton finally notices this and slapped my face hard. My head's jerked backwards and I smile up at him and taste blood in my mouth, a thin trickle of the stuff leaking from my nose. "Quinn, you have to stop this. Wake up," Peyton shouts, dragging me backwards with him, ripped free from the barn's clues at last. "I won't let you go, I promise." He whacks me again viciously, and this time I snap out of it. "See, you're all right." Peyton sits back and dusts off his hands as I start to shiver uncontrollably. "Hey, Quinn, are you all right?" Peyton takes off his coat and wraps it around me. his dangerously sharp eyes studying me closely. "Come on, you have to believe me," he says. "I never meant for this to happen." Peyton used a slender finger and wipes at the smudge of blood on my cut lip, and I cry, unable to understand why I can't feel his simple gestures. "I'm so sorry. This shouldn't have happened. You weren't supposed to come in here," he mumbled, then stopped abruptly as if he hadn't meant to say so much. Wide-eyed, I suddenly realized that maybe he was actually in control of this reality he'd created for me. Don't listen to him. My brain struggles through the slosh of fog to scream. Don't let him in again. You only see what he allows you to see. Warily, I blink heavy lashes and wonder why I can't get away, why I still feel such strong feelings for him. Why do I want him like a little lost puppy? Get away from me. I finally yelp, shoving him off. I struggle to get up, but my legs are unbelievably weak beneath me. Peyton's face turns concerned. He's trapped me into some kind of illusion, and I won't fall for it, I think dimly. He's a gray person, one of those things like I used to see when I was a child. With effort, I stand and sway, limping over to look at the broken floorboards and gaping hole. I blink, seeing a small white room far away. Peyton snorts as I catch my breath. On the floor in a corner below me, huddled what I thought looked like the vague outline of a person, slowly rocking back and forth. He's making me see things. Peyton doesn't move. He just watches me as I fight to walk in a straight line, attempting to get away from it. "Quinn." Peyton gets up, forming a smile. "No. Hey." He holds out a hand to me, but the sight of him is making me sick. What was it about Peyton that made me want to die, I think? "Come away from there," he says sternly, but I stumble back, heading to the open barn door, cowering at the creepy, cold, empty laughing that starts up from behind me. He knows I know, and doesn't even try to hide it anymore. It doesn't even sound much like him anymore. It's nothing like the devilish, tall body shop owner that could once make my heart stop with just a smile. "You'll get lost, Quinn," he yells after my retreating form. But I was already lost, I think to myself, lost and tangled up into your illusion. You'll never find your way back. It will only get worse and worse until it's too late to stop. Then more hysterical giggles. "You'll wish you'd had me." He doesn't seem to have a mind to follow, but I start running nonetheless, not even stopping to look back at the monster that shrieks eerily in the dark. "I'm the only one that can help you," I hear him screaming from far away. Little did I know how these words would come back to haunt me later. God, what was that? I cry, making it out into the hard-packed road, my body screaming at me from the abuse I'd suffered. I turned my face to look up at the sky and felt the silver moonlight glitter down onto me, showing a clear path back to the little car and the glow of a fire. So I trudged towards the comfort of warmth and light, breaking into camp out of breath. Father's stinking drunk, blurry downing another bottle of alcohol as I approached. He's placed his rusty lawn chair near the fire so close that his boots have nearly caught a blaze. He looks up surprised when I come into view. "Shit, kid, what happened to you?" He leans back in his chair. "I had half a mind to come looking for you." I drop down to my knees in front of the fire and shake my head, stunned and unable to make out any real words. From the looks of it, he'd already gathered a rather substantial amount of firewood, I observed numbly. So why then had I been sent out to fetch some? "Quinn, what's wrong?" Father asks, eyeing my clothes and muddy shoes with evident distrust. "You're bleeding. Where have you been all this time? You should be ashamed of yourself. You had me worried." I wiped at my face as he scolded, wondering what I could possibly say that wouldn't anger him further. "I'm sorry, I got out. I'm afraid I'm just not myself this evening." "Clearly," Father huffed as I look down and furiously brush at a patch of dirt that stains the front of my shirt, worried he might inquire after Peyton. What could I even say? That his partner had tried jumping me. Distracted, I held a hand up to the warmth of the fire and wondered if it would hurt if my palm touched the live flames. Had Peyton caused me to hallucinate back there? I always knew that something about my life was off, but it had never been this clear before. Occasionally, I'd get this horrible, sickening feeling, like what was happening in front of me wasn't actually real, almost as if I'd already done this before, or been here already. But still, I'd never witnessed the floor of the world drop out from under me either. Impulsively, I reached out and touched a coal that had rolled off of the fire near my foot. Ow. I hear myself gasp, jerk back into reality. Quinn, be careful. Crack. My muscles stiffen as a stick snaps somewhere off into the dark. This makes Father look over at me suspiciously. Without thinking, I hide my hand behind my back. What were you doing out there for so long anyhow? He inquires, putting another log onto the fire from his pile. He hovered above me, his arms full of wood. I closed my hand into a fist and winced at the sear of unbearable pain. And don't lie to me this time. Come on, Quinn. Father sets the wood down, all but one branch, which he holds like a beating stick, threateningly poised as if he's considering using it. I swallowed, wishing my new burn was bad enough to take my mind out of here. Goes, you think I'm going to be able to take a second whipping? I know you've been lying about an awful lot of things lately. His eyes are dark. Well, what do you have to say for yourself? He paused, and I fought wildly to come up with some sort of story to pace him. But all I can focus on is the burning sensation. You've been watching me for days now, haven't you? Just waiting for the perfect opportunity to do me in. Don't think I haven't noticed. No, I'd never... Hush, Father bristled, growing still more paranoid. I know how it feels. You just can't get the idea of that place out of your head, at least once it sets seed in your mind. With hollow eyes, sits back down again and breaks open another bottle. It's eating you alive, isn't it? He was almost sympathetic. Tearfully, I looked up at him, unable to remain indifferent. Come on, Quinn. We both know why you're out here. Won't have to worry about me. I promise it's Peyton you need to be afraid. Oof. Father almost dropped his bottle. Peyton? He questions. Quinn, who's Peyton? You know, I trail off as Father looks about the woods in a panic, as if searching for an unknown enemy. It's... Quinn, listen. If somebody else is out there, you have to let me know. Amazed, I realize that Father has no idea of whom I'm talking about. But Peyton rode with us for hours right out of the city. I marvel. They were talking together the whole time. Peyton loudly beat me just on the other side of Father's car. Quinn. When I turn back, Father's got his gun out again. Is there anyone out there I should know about? No, I lie. 2. Tuesday, July 23rd. At around noon, I began to lose all hope that we might find the mansion Father was tirelessly searching for. We traveled nearly all morning, seeing nothing at all except for wild prairie lands. Once in a while, though, Father would fill up his car at one of the sorrowful little roadside stations. They'd sit seemingly alone in the desolate landscape, holding up their heads bravely. Already struggling to keep everything together, I'd ask to use their toilet and then flee to the bathroom where I'd stand peering into the glass at myself. What's wrong with you? I'd cry, afraid of my own reflection. Why are seeing things? I'd tear off my shirt and stare in tears at the little number Peyton had done on me. Because it was all still there. I'd silently make myself look at the ugly welts that stood out boldly across my back and shoulders, and use this as means to keep myself from losing it too completely. This, I told myself again and again, is proof that Peyton was really here, once feeling the bruises that were tender to the touch. I'd press my fingers into the purplish marks and make myself take the pain until it stopped flinching. But I couldn't block out the hollow sense, as if somebody had cut open my chest and torn out everything that mattered. All the things I thought I knew seemed confused. All the misplaced junk they'd brought along somehow had slipped away. All the broken Christmas balls, the chimney pipes and wire was now nowhere to be seen. Almost as if it had been snuffed out along with Peyton. But strangely, I could still feel his presence, as if he were right beside me, leaning over my shoulder. But when I swing around to look, he's simply not there. Pretty soon I can't eat, can't sleep. Anxiously, I wait for something to happen, but nothing does. Then gradually I started to see small inconsistencies in Father's fantasies, holes in his story. Sometimes he'd say that this place we were traveling to was a grand, tragic mansion, old but beautiful. However, other accusations he's called it the trashy abandoned house, or perhaps even the hillside hoarder farmhouse. Was it two different buildings? I'd wonder. Then religiously, he'd ask for directions at every goddamn station, and each time his description of the house would vary in sizes and details. Even the color would change from a pale pink to faded blue, and sometimes even green. It's a tall house standing by itself on a little hill, he'd explain earnestly to an unconvinced, weathered storekeeper. It's on the bend in the road across from a lot of huge old oaks. There's a mighty large collection of late automobiles in the valley below the house, beside the river and the cow pastures. Nope, haven't seen anything like that round Theo's parts, the gas station attendant would say. But then other times people would try in vain to help him. They'd dig out travel guide pamphlets and pore over old maps until they'd finally decide that it wasn't worth the trouble and send us on our way, loaded up with pity baskets filled with soggy sandwiches, hard-boiled eggs, and sometimes apple cider or bottles of soda. They probably thought that he was crazy and just wanted us gone as soon as possible. I think the people of the town was afraid of this house. Father began as we drove along an endless field of daisies. They said that the person who once owned this mansion never stopped building. I looked at the hundreds of golden heads of flowers and wondered why they looked so distant, not as if they were far away, but as though they were not real. It was a funny sort of feeling looking at them as they rustled quietly under the wide open blue sky. I felt like my brain was trying really very hard to truly see them, but for some reason my eyes were not actually telling me the truth. What appeared to be there was not there. But if it wasn't a field of daisies and blue sky, what was hidden behind it? This question alone scared me. What was hiding in plain sight? Why were the villagers afraid of this farmhouse? I asked absent-mindedly, not really caring what Father had to say to this anymore, my eyes never leaving the golden flowers that swept on it seemed forever. Well, Father answered. After some time, it was more than obvious that he'd begun digging the old man that owned this mansion. Once, of course, he'd ran out of things to do in the house. I turned to look over at Father, darting my eyes away from the deceiving flowers. What do you mean he started digging? I asked, puzzled. Father blew his nose, and this time a lot of black boo covered his dirty handkerchief. The dark-colored slim ran down the front of his shirt, and I could do nothing but quickly look away. Well, I guess he built until there was nothing left to do but to begin digging. I caught a whiff of flowery perfume and closed my eyes tiredly, almost past caring what they were. My father told me back in his day you'd see huge piles of earth and fascinating mounds all over the hillside farm. So, you're telling me there's rooms under this place as well? I asked, unsettled. The very thought of tunnels and passageways beneath the house made me more than a little ill. Well, nobody ever saw them, Father admitted. We just saw enough dirt and mud to cover half the state. Do you think he's still down there, trapped perhaps in one of his meany great rooms? I asked. Father pondered on this for a while, and then at length shook his head. No, I'm not sure what happened to him. Some folks even started calling him the Mole Man. Father laughed. Sometime later we reached our impossible destination. Just before evening we rolled into a wretched little town that sat on the edge of a great big dried-up body of dark brown water. Why, Quinn, look, here it is at last, Father exclaimed overjoyed, happier now than I had possibly ever seen him before. By some curse or miracle, we'd finally found his town. Now over the years, it was clear that the township of Kent had turned in on itself, now merely a ghost of what it once had been. Just look at this place. Father spat hotly, moving his car along the road that hadn't likely seen any automobiles in a long while. past dingy brown houses with closed window shutters and sagging telephone poles. Not a person in sight. Father grumbled, peering at a dime store ice cream shop. Despite the broken sign advertising the latest in ice cream, the tiny faded blue shop appeared closed, possibly abandoned even. "Where is everybody?" I asked softly, afraid of his explosive temper. But the father stayed silent and scowled at every building we passed by, each appearing worse than the last. At length we came across a barefoot little girl in a corduroy dress, wearing her blonde hair up in pigtails. Fascinated, I looked at her muddy skirts and wide empty eyes. Was she one of those things? People contain souls, but these human-like stalkers or shadows have an empty sense about them. But she would have been the youngest one I've seen so far. It was unsettling to watch her creep along the dirt road, with seemingly nothing to do but roam the quiet streets. Did they come as children? The child led a muddy dog by its collar, but as soon as we got closer to her, she scurried away to hide behind a tall wooden fence, taking the dog with her. "Not too much happening around here," Father said glumly, eyeing a woman some houses down as she pinned wet laundry to a clothesline. "I don't like it here, I think." Pieces of the houses were missing, and the wind didn't blow here as if it were a silent picture, when the breeze had been quiet strong just moments before. Nothing moved, not even the crusty gray leaves on the trees. The whole town was grayer than it should have been. It's like a graveyard, with all its color and life long since faded away, never to return. What happened to everything, I wondered aloud. What did the place look like when you were a boy? I spoke up, forcing myself to look away, afraid I'd see something that I wasn't supposed to see. Like a empty frame of a house with nothing behind it, or a broken empty chunk of sky like I'd seen under the barn. Rigidly, I sensed that something here was broken badly, but at the same time I didn't want to believe it, for fear it might be true. Father attempted to smile. "Well, it was a lot prettier back then." I'm sure it was. Silently, we passed an abandoned clothing shop boarded shut. Where were we going to sleep? I agonized restlessly, eyes fixed on a trail of trash strewn out across the ground. Whatever happened to your family's house? I wanted to know, getting under a heavy coat that had been packed yesterday. Before grandfather died. He's not dead. Father quickly corrected me with a snap. "That's just lies you grew up hearing." I started, surprised. Father never talked about his father dying, never once, but the story went that he had died a long time ago. Then grandmother had soon after moved away, taking the children with her. She'd ran to the city to live with a distant relative that was very well off, and soon after met an even wealthier gentleman. Later they were happily married, and this life. Father gestured to the houses and shops around us. All this was like a distant dream. Crows called at us from an empty church steeple, and Father sighed. Mother liked to say that he was dead because it was easier, but he didn't die. He just walked away one day. Father drove to the end of the crummy little street and turned right at the corner. He said he was moving into a new house or some rubbish like that, but either way, I never saw him again after that. "I'm so sorry," I murmured. Why would a man with a perfectly nice wife and family just let it all go? "Don't be sorry," Father says, wiping his nose with a new cloth. "It was a long time ago. Here now, Quinn, look at this." Father pointed out a large building set a bit back from the road. "Now this, my boy, is Beachside Grand Country Hotel." I looked where he pointed and saw a beautiful old red brick building, lined in crumbling white balcony railings and arched windows. I know it's not much to look at now, but it used to be the pride of Kent Town a long time ago. It was very lovely back then. Father parked his car along a strip of broken pavement and got out, looking up at the staging site of red bricks. Mechanically, a large lump began to form in my throat at the sight of the place. I couldn't say why, but I had such a bad feeling about this place that it made me want to turn around and run back home. But of course home wasn't there anymore. My sisters and mother were long gone, moved away. "Quinn." Father went around the car, and reached into the back for our suitcases. "Come on, son." "Wait," he choked as the fear in my chest increases. "Isn't there anywhere else I could stay? It doesn't even look open." Desperately, I glanced up and down the street. "Look, I don't have time for this." Father shoved a box into my arms and swung on his heels. "Quit acting like an entitled child and behave yourself." He strolled ahead of me, the worry lines edged into his face, creasing with his impatience. Where else could I go? My eyes flicked about, but there was nothing, and no one, just Peyton's nagging presence inches away. I fling around and nobody is there. "Get over here, right now," Father barked from a few feet away. Somebody had planted flowers in the beds along the sidewalk, but it didn't help make the place look any prettier. It just succeeded in making the whole place feel wrong in having them there. "Just do it." I placed one foot in front of the other. The dainty flower heads were almost lost in the thicket of weeds. Through the wide double doors that screeched when you opened them, I was whisked into a dark royal blue room with a heavy staircase in the back lined in plush velvet. I wrinkled my nose. It smelled like rotten wood in here and grandma's spices, too strong to enter for long without sneezing. "Here, Quinn, come sit." Father glanced at me suspiciously, as if he half expecting me to blow up and start screaming that I hated it. "Why can't I just come with you out to the house?" I asked softly. He stiffened. "No." His voice sounded strained. "You'll stay here as we discussed and wait for me." "But why? Why can't I help you out there?" I began talking quickly before he can cut me off. There must be an awful lot to do after all, with it being abandoned for so many years. Frantically, I watched his calm demeanor begin to change to anger. "Couldn't I come with you and help fix it up?" "No," he all but shouted, whacking me across the cheek, stopping me mid-sentence. "Look what you made me do." He almost smiled at my recoil. "Now sit tight, and I'll let you know when you can talk again." Mumbling to himself under his breath, Father huefully led me over to a front dining room. "Now please just shut up and don't take to anyone." He glanced about, then half shoves me into a chair. My eyes began to burn, but I fought away the tears, determined not to let him see me cry. This hole was musky and even more foul than the foyer. It was filled with tables and arranged neatly with chairs set into unlovely exactness. The far corner was black as midnight and held the distinct sense that it was hiding something. The clerk's desk lay a short distance away from the dining room, where a weedy-looking woman that had bright carroty color hair and a pinched long face appeared behind the desk, coming out from one of the inner rooms, wiping her hands on a white apron. They spoke softly together, and I couldn't hear what they were saying. I shifted uneasily and peered into the back of the dark room. Beachside Hotel had only been called this because the once grand hotel had been built beside Star Valley Lake. A faded painting hanging on the wall above my table showed off what the hotel and lake might once have looked like, depicting glittery water sparkling in the sunlight beside a glorious new hotel. I'm in the mood for love. I jumped at the unexpected sound of dreamy music and swung to look into the dark hall. A record player had begun to play, placed on top of one of the awful tables. The sherry melody floated about and made the hair on my arms stand up. I was certain that I could feel somebody approaching my table, but when I spun around to look, nobody was there. I'm in the mood for love, simply because you're near me. The song drowned on as if mocking me. Was it Peyton? I panicked, looking about the dark shadows for him. I attempt to sit up in my chair like a true gentleman, silently praying that it wasn't my devilish tormentor, that I could feel behind my chair breathing down my back. Slowly I got up, pushing the chair back into the table. He was standing across the room in the dark, just ahead of me. I was almost certain of it. I could almost smell the faint scent of his sweet cologne. Taste the smell of his cigarettes. Yes, something moved. Inching away from the room, I backed towards the clerk's desk, only to find that Father and the clerk had vanished, leaving me to stand alone at the foot of the staircase. Suddenly, a small hand reached out and took mine. to which I screamed, startled, flailing out at the air. "Oh, hush." A little girl giggled lightly, pulling me aside with her to dive behind a drooping, curtained-off hideout. "Nobody will see us here," she chirps up, amused at my fright. Quickly I composed myself, recognizing the little blonde pigtails from earlier. "He beats you," she half whispered, soft eyes wide. "He's not supposed to hurt them." She took my hand in hers and looked sorrowful at me. "Does it hurt?" she asked. "No," I answered, pulling my hand away. Who was this child, and how had she known? "I'm sorry," she volunteered with a sympathetic tinge in her voice, popping down onto a luxurious rug. She seemed to know an awful lot about the things going on around here. "Are you lost?" she wanted to know, straightening her purple dress and looking up at me sweetly as if she dearly wanted to make friends with someone. "No, why?" I asked, sitting down next to her. "I don't know," she replied. This child was like a little wax doll, beautiful and delicate in every way, too perfect to be real. I shuddered as the back rooms behind the curtain rattled with the echo of a Coco clock. "Don't be scared." The pretty picture consoled me with a large smile. "He's not around right now," she giggled, all knowingly pulling the loose strings out of the beautifully braided rug. "He's sleeping," she reassured me, holding up a thread of yarn between tiny fingers. "Who's sleeping?" I inquired. "You know," she said mysteriously, working the string into a knot. Her hands were dirty as well as the area around her lower lip. "The man upstairs." My eyes widened. Pigtails must have read the look of fear on my face, because she immediately began to spill still more scary tidbits of information. "If you're not already lost, you will be soon," she insisted, bouncing to happy to be true. "Slow down. What are you talking about?" I asked urgently, but she shook her head decidedly no, and put a finger up to her lips as if to hush me. "Everybody gets lost," she said in a little voice, her whole face smiling innocently as if she didn't understand the seriousness of her own words. "What do you mean they get lost?" But the little pigtails refused to elaborate any further, as if afraid somebody might overhear us. Instead, she went on to introduce herself. She was Elsie Cartwright, 8.5 years old, and she loved dogs. Then her happy little smile slowly faded somewhat, and in a small whisper, Elsie admitted that she hadn't seen her papa in a very long time, and that today she had decided to go looking for him on her own. "Where did he go?" I pried, but of course she didn't know. "You should run away too," Elsie advised. "It's too late for the rest of them, but maybe if you could get far enough away." Suddenly the curtains were flung back furiously, and both Elsie and I jumped in surprise as bright light flooded our tiny hideout. "My goodness, Quinn," Father scolded, looking down at me, horrified to see his son sitting on the floor. "What are you doing?" he asked, puzzled, as I quickly get up. "Nothing, I just wanted to get a look around." He frowns. "Well, fine then, but first come see our room." Father handed me a trunk from his stack. "I'm in an awful hurry, but maybe if we're quick, I can get a look at that house tonight." "Tonight?" I stopped short as we reached the elegant staircase. "You can't be meaning to go out there this evening. It's nearly dark." Father chuckled lightly. "And who's going to stop me?" His eyes swept across me accusingly. "You?" He turned away to begin climbing the stairs. But you don't know what's out there," I protest, following him up a few more steps. "Stop worrying about it, kid. Everything is going to be okay. I have it all handled." Quickly, I glanced back over my shoulder, and there she was. Little Pigtails sat under one of the lavish tables, seated beside her muddy dog, steadily watching us. Carefully, the dainty cloth raised up for just an instant, and a little hand waved goodbye to me. "The clerk back there." Father stopped at the top of the stairs and turned right. "She rented out this room to us for a fortnight. I saw to it that everything you might need is already arranged. Now all you have to do is keep quiet and out of my way." Father set his trunks down outside of a suite and fumbled with his key in the lock. "Can you do that for me, boy?" He paused and waited for my response. "Yes, Father," I echoed obediently. Bathed in sweat, I jerked up from the cramped car's back seat as if I had been electrocuted. "Hold on tight." My eyes widened as Peyton thrust a bundle of Christmas lights into my arms. The wires and balls were frayed and alive. "No, wait!" I screamed as the flicker of electricity crackled before it was placed into my arms. Jerked back and forth, it felt like everything was zapping me at once. Peyton handed me 2 hot cords, and my hands began to burn as electricity drove through me. "I don't want this," I howled as the jolts traveled through my veins. "Too bad." Peyton picked up a pair of tweezers. "You don't have a choice, and besides..." He dipped the flash of silver into a sanitizing bath. "You won't even feel this anyways." "What?" Looking down, I made out a sort of hospital chair and machines. I was wearing a white gown and had been secured to the chair with thick straps and buckles. "Try not to move for a minute." Peyton's tweezers reached for something inside the hole in my chest. "There's a cavity in my rib cage," I cry, trying to obey him and stay still. Peyton's instruments makes a soft metallic clinking sound, and my arm jerks sideways all on its own. "Easy." Peyton pulls something out of the cavity, a small pill-sized object that looks like a piece of rice. "Merry Christmas." Peyton beams, dropping his chip into a bedside tray. Suddenly he popped like a helium balloon, and the picture shattered. Opening back up my eyes cautiously, I found myself staring at the back of Father's head. We sat unmoving in his blue Lincoln, parked in the middle of the lone road. Slowly, terrifyingly, the creepy labored breathing comes to an abrupt end. He just sits there directly in front of me and doesn't say a word. The heavy silence is palpable and I start sweating. "Say something!" I want to scream at him, but my lips are quivering because I can see his fists still on the steering wheel begin to ball up, his knuckles turning white. I don't dare say anything, but I wonder if it'd be possible to jump out of his car and start running. Then after what feels like forever, he moves, making me jerk. Rigidly, Father perks up like a dog that's just caught a tasty scent. I swallowed, feeling him shift his attention to my little bits of movement in the back. Can he hear my pounding heart? I wonder as slow tears begins to trickle down my face. He's acting like a mad dog and one that's just now picked up on my scent. As if on coy, he sniffs the air. "Please don't." I want to beg him. "Please don't hurt me." Stiffly, he turns in his seat until his head is turned back towards me. Almost unnaturally far, I screamed, and his head makes a sickening popping sound. "What the hell are you doing in here?" he asks, bewildered, one hand reaching for the door latch. "He's going to get out and tear me apart." My brain begins to sob. "He's going to feed off of your terror and rip the skin off your bones while you're still alive and watching. Please." I begin to plead, crying because the look on his face is white with rage. The door pops open and I begin screaming for him to wait, just to listen to me first. I said, "What are you doing here?" He more like Tars opened the back car door and grabbed me by my shirt collar. I feel him lift me into the air with impossible strength. I don't know," is all I can spit out as he places me onto the ground. My head smacks the dirt with a harsh thud, and I struggle because the air is knocked out of my lungs. "Speak up, kid. You have 3 seconds before I tear you a new one." He lifts my head and pounds it back down so hard I see stars and my ears begin to ring. "Help me," I murmur. "Please," I try to say, but I can't, so he takes the opportunity to choke me. Dazed, I feel his large, meaty hands clamp around my throat. Eyes wide, I sob out whatever he wants to hear while trying to breathe. "You snuck along, didn't you?" He's barking, spitting into my face, tightening his grip on my throat until I begin kicking. "You brought me," I screamed. "Remember you dragged me out to the car?" He pauses to think, and I can tell that he barely recognizes me. What's happened to him? Slowly he gets up off of me and shades his eyes from the sunlight and squints at something in the distance. I half roll over and sit up on one elbow. In the distance sits a house just waiting for us. Father leaves the car and begins running towards it. "No," I call after him. "Don't give it what it wants." But the glob of a monster made from dark wood, with the black eyes with huge claws and teeth, already sees us and has woken up. It's just a dream. Dragged forward, I open my eyes and see that the little bedroom is in shambles, nearly destroyed by my lucid flailing about. Little glass lamps lay where they'd been swept over onto the floor. My sheets are wrapped about me, damp with perspiration. Looking down, I almost expect to see freshly sewn up stitches, but it was just a dream. Wait, I peer down and see a small birthmark in around just the same spot. But that's always been there. I've always had that mark. To my dismay, I see that Father has gone again. He'd returned somewhere in the middle of the night and slept in his bed that was obvious enough from the mess of tangled sheets and flattened feather pillows. I have to get breakfast, I thought hungrily. I have to get away from this place. This morning, the once dark blue dining room seemed slightly brighter as I crept into its unwelcoming hall. The maid on duty had drawn the heavy drapes away to let in what light there was from outside. She had dusted as well and set out clean-cut glass dishes on all the little tables. Instead of serving anyone, I saw that she had left a silver trolley near the door, and drifting from it was the most delightful smells. Here, silver dishes contained thick strips of bacon, hot buttermilk pancakes, scrambled egg sausages, and a large jug filled with fresh coffee. A rather surprising spread considering the poor accommodations. Eat something, I told myself. You have to keep your strength up. You have to find your way out of here. Feeling starved, I made myself load up a plate and take it to a small table by the window. Here there were other people. I don't have to be alone anymore, I told myself with a little childish flutter of hope. A lady and small man ate their own breakfast a few tables away. But soon it became more than obvious that they were arguing about something important. "I don't understand, dear," the woman whispered. "We can't spare any more time." Soon I realized that the unhappy couple seemed to do more staring at me than eating, so I hung my head and focused on my own plate. But the food didn't taste as good as it looked, and I struggled to continue. Carefully, I poured syrup from a chintzy glass onto my pancakes and watched the sweet golden liquid drown my food. "Stop wasting time." A small voice fussed at me from inside my head. "You know you can't run away this time. Stop it. Stop talking." I closed my eyes and pressed a finger into my forehead, but the voices behind my eyes was still debating whether or not I was going to step up. Between small bites, I looked out of the tall windows. Next to the lake, I could just make out children throwing stones into the water and jumping in to splash each other. Their little party erupted into laughter, and I looked away quickly. I wished that I could feel happy, I thought. Then, after a while, a plump little man entered our dining room, carrying not one, but 2 plates of food with him, each filled to overflowing with egg sausages and bacon. He looked around briskly before finally finding himself at table close to the angry couple. No sooner had the gentleman taken a few hearty bites, he then began to whisper loudly to them. At first they pretended not to hear, turning their heads away. But this didn't work for long. "Have you seen the house?" he asked again, speaking urgently. Slowly I lifted my eyes from off my plate and glanced over to their small party. Surely he couldn't be talking about Father's house, could he? My timid gaze fixed on them in a loss for words. "No, what house?" the stern woman snapped back. She reminded me of my own mother. Selfish and proud, too concerned with her own affairs to catch the little things. "The big house outside of town, surely you've seen it. The place is impossible to miss." Dismayed, I laid down my fork. I simply couldn't eat anymore. I think I've heard all of this before. The town and hotel along with it felt cursed. No matter what tragedy always seemed to catch up with you. Come on, it's a very old sort of mansion from the looks of it, the oversized gentleman was saying, scratching his receding hairline thoughtfully. No, I'm afraid we haven't seen it. Leave us alone if you please. The woman fussed, flipping her hand dismissively. She's awful, a small voice says in the back of my mind. Don't you hate her? She's just like Mother, always fussing at people. I've seen it. The quiet man beside the woman finally spoke up, unable to hold himself back. His whole face growing flushed with the same strange kind of excitement that the plump gentleman possessed. To this I began to tremble. He was beginning to act as my father had. He was being called by the house, sought out after, and the pull was almost too much for him to bear. No, Harold, the woman insisted. We haven't seen it. We are leaving today, and nobody's going to stop at any old wreck. She dabbed at her hot face with a lace doily and sat back decidedly. But I am, though, the quiet husband replied calmly, as if bewitched by a higher force. No, what on earth has gotten into you, man? The woman's husband's face paled slightly, but he kept his composure and rambled on unchecked. I saw a house yesterday. It was pretty far out, though, maybe around 3 or so miles. That's the one. The large man that had been quiet up until now gasped, choking down a large cup of coffee, too excited to contain himself. I want to buy it. I want to live there. Ridiculous, the other man's wife spat. I don't remember seeing any houses. You're both mad. But there was one, the girl's husband retorted. Each, it seemed, sharing in the very same kind of dream that didn't seem real to anyone else but them. Well, if you asked me for my opinion, which you haven't, I'd tell you that it's just a pile of old rubbish, nothing more. She was growing short-tempered now, fanning her face with a small cotton blue fan. Quietly I got up. Overhearing their concerning conversation had finally stirred something deep within me. No one was stopping me from just walking away. I was going to leave today, I told myself, pocketing some covered slices of bacon for the road. Reserved, I tried to avoid gathering attention as I crept back to the foyer and slipped past the clerk's desk, then the grand stairs. It was raining outside, a thin, fine sprinkle of cold water, as I emerged from the dark clutches of the hotel. Grateful to be free of it, I took in a large breath of fresh air, relieved to finally be free, and started down the steep steps, taking 2 at a time. Suddenly, Pigtails greeted me by throwing a clump of mud at my face. She'd been making mud pies and cakes next to the road, sitting beside a muddy puddle of murky water. Feeling lighter than I had felt in weeks, I dodged the mud and chased after her. I'm gonna get you, I called as she screamed as only small children can scream, and fled down the damp street towards the dime store. Here she stopped and held up her arms in surrender. I give up, she giggled, turning towards the faded store window to gaze longingly at the ice cream behind the glass. She looked hungry, so I led her inside, reasoning with myself that just a little ice wouldn't hurt anyone, and then I'd be on my way to hopefully catch a train. Come here, I said, fishing in my pockets for some money. I'll make you a deal. What kind of deal? She asked suspiciously. Well, if you promise to stop throwing mud at people, I'll buy you an ice cone. Really? Her whole face lit up at this, and she shook my outstretched hand vigorously. It's a deal. Together we made ourselves comfortable at a little red booth, and each of us picked out a nice flavor to try. Did you end up finding him? I asked her once we were settled. Who? She asked. Your papa? To this her countenance fell. No. Her voice was sad. Who's this now? The lady asked, leaning her weight over the counter to squint at us. Hello, I'm Quinn. I'm new to town. New? The girl laughed. What do you mean you're new to town? People don't come here, she fussed. They leave. They go missing. Pigtails chirps up, but the girl with the plump double chin wasn't listening. Well, my father moved us here from Cranberryville. At this, the girl erupted into laughter. Impossible. She shook her head doubtfully. There hasn't been any houses sold around these parts, at least not for 50 years. How do you know? I asked. Because, she snorted, there just ain't anybody to sell him your father a house. I frowned, looking down at the melting pink ice in my hand. The girl turned away to dust at a pile of glass dishes, uninterested. Sure, maybe you've seen a couple of old ladies. Where's all the men? Gone, the girl replied shortly. Restless people, I guess. Now, as for me, I'm too old to go and run away. As the woman spoke, she picked up a plump cherry and placed it into Pigtail's dwindling ice cream cone. She smiled fondly at the child and retreated back into the dim back room. Pigtails? I asked, getting to my feet a bit unsteadily. Where does everyone go? The little girl rose to follow me, shaking her little head. I don't know. I'm only a very little girl. I know you are, but I need answers, don't you see? Try to think. Where could they have all gone? Maybe lost inside a house someplace. I told you already. I don't know, she cried, stomping her foot. They just walk away. But where? Where do they walk off to? Is it a farm nearby? No, I don't know, I can't. She huffed, rubbing her eyes close to tears. Don't be scared. I tried to comfort her. I just know that something's wrong with the people around here. That's why I have to leave. Pigtail's eyes began to glitter in huge tears. You're running away, aren't you? You're trying to escape. Yes, I have to. She wiped her eyes bravely and nodded. A train station, where can I find the nearest stop? Slowly, the little girl collected herself and thought. Come on, I urged, looking up at the rain that had begun to come down a little bit harder. I have to hurry before the storm gets here. Pigtail's eyebrows gathered together and she almost seemed to hesitate. Please, you know I can't stay here. You have to help me. I waited, and the sound of distant thunder reached my ears. Pigtail shuddered and pointed westward. There's one at Mayflower City, Mommy used to. She stopped and hugged onto my arm. Be careful. Promise? Yes, I promise. Goodbye, and good luck to you. She waved as I started away at a brisk walk. Half turning, I raised a hand to wave back, but she had already vanished. And all that was left of her was a half-eaten ice cream cone laying spilled on the street. Leaving town heading west took me along a straight low road, dotted here and there by empty brown farmhouses. But they were not sinister and frightening such as the mansion Father had secured. These were sadly homes people had left when fleeing to the cities, looking for work. Using a dry stick as a walking staff, I trudged across a wide-covered bridge. This, I thought, must have been very beautiful back in its day. But now, without any repairs done to it, the decaying bridge would soon be on its way out. Strolling inside, I found an intricate array of spiders' webs, daintily crisscrossing the dingy rafters, and carefully woven into the railings. Honeybees had claimed this lonely covered bridge as well, flying delicately back and forth out of a shallow knothole in the disintegrated wood, carrying a powdery yellowish sample of flower pollen with them as they went. I'm going, I reassured the little workers that swooped down on me warningly. I won't hurt your nest, I promised, on the other side. The water rushed on past the bridge in happy little ripples to join a much larger river, nearly lost beneath a sea of tall grass and cow thistles, Queen Anne's lace, and more sunflowers. Furiously, the river clawed maddeningly on in such a hurry that it caught my attention for a moment. Where does it have to go in such a rush? I wondered. Behind me, a rainbow shone almost directly above the wretched little town. Look, it's not so bad now, it almost seemed to say. Come back, don't go. But I refused to be swayed. In fact, I couldn't wait to leave this place that looked so innocent in some spots and felt so unwelcoming in others. If only I could find some train tracks, I thought, following the river that ran parallel to a hard dirt road, scattered in flower fluff. Train tracks would lead me to its station, where I could secure a ticket back to the city, and possibly even telegraph my mother. Only there were no tracks around here, and very few road signs. Some of the markers were even destroyed, hacked at as if somebody wanted to confuse anyone attempting to use them. Hills grew into steep bluffs above the river, and fields faded into patches of woods, then eased back out into green cow pastures and sunny hollows. Above me, the sky lightened and cleared, and all traces of rain slipped away. Up a hill I climbed, and then down onto the other side into the shade, walking through the valley, starting up the next hill. The wind began to dreamily pick up, and I smelled it for the first time. Almost smoky, it tinted the bright afternoon sky into a deeper shade of blue, weaving almost as if it were water. Then the wind cut and stopped altogether, making me hesitant. What was it? Eerily, I turned to look about, suddenly suspicious. There it was again, a strange scent coming towards me, drifting lightly on the air, invisible except for a slightly grayish-purple hint. Still no train tracks to follow, and there hadn't been any readable signs for about 2.5 miles. Had I really been walking for 2 miles? I asked myself, worried, because the time had started to feel hazy. How long had I been walking? I shaded my eyes from the sun and searched the valleys, only to see gentle swooping plains and fields that I did not recognize. How could I have walked through them all, but at the same time never really saw them? Well, what was the last thing you remember seeing? I asked myself, think, damn it. I'm trying. Quickly I closed my eyes and tried to concentrate, but it was almost impossible. All I could recall was the covered bridge pass that I couldn't remember anything. The air up here is full of the smoky metallic scent, and it's everywhere, as if there's a massive bonfire burning just on the other side of the rise. Abruptly, the road takes a nasty turn, placed some 100 feet above the winding strip of river that I'd been following earlier. As if in a daze, I walked over to the edge and marveled at the tall oaks that stood along the drop-off, guarding the road from anyone that might hover too close to its edge. Far below, in the dewy valley, waited a collection of late automobiles covered in rust, and next to them, running away off into the pastures of green clover, were the train tracks. Here's my ticket out of here, I think, but I didn't go down to it, not just yet, I told myself firmly, with a little shake of excitement. Instead, I walked up the last rolling little rise, where I was met by a sagging fence line barring my way. Nothing can stop me now, I think, slipping through it with determination, not even noticing the barbed wire as it caught at my boots, tearing one off. Keep out, no trespassers, read a battered sign nailed to a fallen tree stump. Here's a sign that hasn't been damaged, I think, crawling to my feet. Up here the wind whips my hair around my face wildly and howls as if it's trying to huff and puff and blow me away. It's stronger on the crest of the hill than it was below, and it's mixed with the same strange hue of color, but the smell of smoky dust is the worst part. The tangles of grass was almost too much to walk through, but I couldn't stop myself from continuing. It was like I wasn't myself any longer. I felt restless and expectant, as if something wonderful was about to happen. I have to see it, I told myself, helplessly trudging through the snarls of weeds, making my way up the gravel driveway. I have to see what's going to happen. This road had clearly not been driven on for a very long time, except for one pair of tire marks freshly stamped into the dirt. Slowly I came to a stop at the top and looked stunned at Father's crumpled little car. He'd parked it into a giant oak tree, smashing the hood and violently destroying the front left fender in the process. Twisted metal and shards of broken glass littered the ground around me. It appeared as though he had leaped out of the car, leaving the driver's side door hanging open, but there was no further sign of him. Slowly, Peyton's words began to ring in my ears tauntingly. "You'll never find your way back," he'd said. "It'll only get worse." Up here I could see over the road and more of the steep embankment where somebody else had driven their car right off the edge. "It will only get worse and worse until it's too late to stop," he'd screamed. The car that had been driven off the bend hung helplessly caught up in a scrubby tree, suspended halfway down. Suddenly I noticed an ancient ice chest that lay a few feet away in a pile of garbage. This is it, my mind poked at me in a silly little fluster of excitement. But what was it? What's inside Quincy? I could almost imagine Peyton asking me, guiding me along as if he had controls in his hands. What dizzy secrets does it hold? Slowly, helplessly, I trudged over to it, unable to stop myself. A carousel horse, completely bleached white from the sun, sat in a pile of oak leaves and playground parts, leaning up against the refrigerator. "Move them away. Open it." Peyton insisted, driving me on further, but I'm afraid. I murmured back to him, stooping to pick up a broken teacup. On the ground in the bramble of Queen Anne's lace sat a dainty teapot that matched my cup and a chipped, forgotten milk tumbler. "Afraid of a refrigerator?" he asks with a chuckle. "I'm only afraid of what's beneath it," I replied, putting back the blue cup. Perhaps a little girl, much like Elsie, had come here with her dolls and held a grand fairy tea party, only to forget her treasures when it was time to go back home. "Do it," Peyton commanded with a little more force, and this time I obeyed. Carefully, I walked across a blue tarp that had been spread out haphazardly over a pile of rotting lumber. Quickly taking a deep breath, I leaned down and tried to pry open the door. But it didn't budge, and I had to kick and pound at it until it finally came open. "Oh God!" I gasped, jumping back, letting the door slam shut. Under THR refrigerator was another door, a hidden one with huge rusty hinges and a large slider bolt set neatly into the steel. From what I could see, the back of the refrigerator had been cleverly removed and then placed over with a kind of hatch. Gathering up what courage I still had left, I kneeled down and once again pulled open the old door. It came away, and I sat back in the sun and stared at the second door with a sinking kind of dread in my heart. "Was Father down there?" I said, closing one eye so as not to have to fully see what lay beneath. Quickly, I wrenched open the second door like ripping off a Band-Aid, and then peeked between my fingers because I'd covered up my face with my hands. Under the second door was a small opening. I leaned forward on my heels and peered down, holding my breath. There was a small flight of steps made out of bricks. "Shit," I breathed. The space was pitch black and cold, and the smell wafting up at me was of blood. "You're not really going to go down there, are you?" I felt myself begin to whimper inwardly. "But I have to. Father might be hurt. He might need me." And so this thought drove me on. Piles of candles lay all over the stairs, along with small boxes of matches. "At least I'll be able to see," I told myself. Weakly, I got up and eased myself into the small opening, shivering slightly at the cold air that wafted up from far below. Maybe that aroma wasn't blood, but only the smell of minerals from the ground. I tried to tell myself, looking for a candle, most of which were small stubs already burned out. At first, this fact didn't bother me, because it had never crossed my mind that if all the candles were burned, didn't that mean that somebody must have been here, or rather was here right now? The mucky steps further down were littered with trash as I took a closer look. Newspaper clippings and shreds of cloth, broken glass, and a single boot lay at my feet. I held up a large candle that had been secured with a trusty homemade wick and lit a match from a box I found on the step. Warmly, the staircase flickered into orangey light, illuminating the steps in front of me. "It's a lot further down than I was expecting," I told myself, holding the candle out to see by. "Indeed, it's a great deal more than I had thought." I steadily rose and squinted to see down the steps. Somebody's already been here, I realized queasily. Was it Father? Slowly, I ventured down further, searching to see if I could make out anyone at the bottom, but it was still too far down to see anything of real interest. Gingerly, I stepped around a pile of old mousetraps. Suddenly, I heard something. I stopped dead in my tracks and listened, frozen to the steps like a statue afraid to move. Was somebody calling for help? It certainly sounded like it. "Father!" I yelled, my voice exploding into the dark and echoing off the walls, sounding further and further away as it moved underground. But then it came again. "Help, help me!" Stumbling forward, I tried to hurry. I'm coming! Ouch! I stabbed my toe against a cracked brick and brought it away, bleeding. "Father, can you hear me?" I set my candle down on the edge of the narrow steps and crouched to inspect my toe. Quickly, I drew a pocket handkerchief out of my shirt and carefully wrapped it up, cursing myself for being so careless. The steps in front of me had railing and I gratefully held on to them for the rest of my trip down. The voice kept calling me far away, but sounded softer and softer as I got closer to the bottom, almost as if the person on the other end was walking away from me instead of coming. Presently I saw the bottom. Around me, walls and floor took on a slightly honeycomb-like appearance in shape and color. This couldn't have been made by any machines or people. Instead, it felt insect-like, as if I were standing at the bottom of a den, or perhaps a sort of beehive. Only they must have been giants to hollow out a space this large. Why am I not afraid? I wondered, looking wearily at the walls that towered so high above my head that my candlelight couldn't reach the top. The floor was a hard-packed dirt, seemingly chewed or dug away at by claw-like arms or ant-like beaks. Who made all this, I wondered, and why would Father come down here? Why am I down here? I glanced back, and I guess I must have walked down around 3 stories worth of stairs. "Father?" I called timidly into the dark, but there was no response this time. I crept forward down the small tunnel, holding my candle up higher to see by, ignoring the little frightened voice in my head pleading with me to turn back. Whoever it is doing this, they've been at it a very long time, maybe hundreds of years. I noted turning a corner in the passageway. Here I broke out into a giant drafty space, almost too dark to see, rounded like a cave, but it wasn't naturally formed. I looked down at my pathetic little candle as it struggled to illuminate everything, and then without warning I came face to face with it. The house. An enormous rotten mansion sat eerily in the dark just ahead of me. Dumbfounded, I backed away, my mouth falling open in complete disbelief. Here it was at last, and I'm afraid to go inside. Huge tears began to roll down my cheeks at the sight of it, and I felt as if I was going to break out crying. The fierce sense of helplessness was almost too overwhelming for me to bear. "God," I let out, my mouth going dry. "What is it?" I'm unable to look away. "Come inside," it seemed to whisper, calling me with unseen outstretched arms and a breaking heart of loneliness. "I'm coming, coming," I let out between panting gasps because I was growing out of breath. The entire house was built underground, and it's looking at me. The design and architecture was brilliant, intricate details wasted on a building nobody would likely ever see or appreciate. It was done up in the manner of houses designed in the early Victorian era. Broad, magnificent steps led up to a wide front porch that encircled the entire house, at least what I could see of it. Pearl white banisters lined in, and tall, ornate pillars held up the covered porch, edged in mold. But it was lovely, absolutely breath-gorgeous. Trimmed in sharp rooftops, towers, and old windows, stained glass doors. The old mansion had even been lovingly painted at some point, a distasteful pink color that faded to blue and even flicks of pale green from place to place. Now poorly hanging on, but the effects of being kept underground had clearly taken its toll on the badly peeling sentiments of love. "Don't be scared. Come inside." The house beckoned, and so I obeyed. Even though every fiber of my well-being screamed at me to stop, I couldn't. Hopelessly, I found myself climbing up the big front steps, cringing inwardly at the sound of wet, creaky wood underfoot. The front door was crumbling inward and remained unlocked, so I pushed it open and fell onto the floor. Inside, at last, I inhaled great large gasps of musty air, thick with the scent of wet clapboard and rotting canvas. "I know now what my purpose is," I tell myself in a flimsy whisper, trembling because I'm so close now to the ending of my story. I'm going to give myself up to it. This merciless drive had begun to eat at me ever since I'd set foot onto this broken farm, but now inside the house it had turned into relentless torture. I felt as though I was supposed to do something, but it wasn't clear what that something was. Desperately, I searched the kitchen and foyer, dismayed to see that everything was completely and utterly ruined. Ceilings caved dangerously in wards as if threatening to fall on me, while strips of pale wallpaper looked to be burly hanging on. Everything was caked in an enormous amount of dust and grime. But worst of all, the two rooms, both the battered kitchen and its adjoining parlor, were crammed to overflowing in rubbish. So much of it, in fact, that it was close to impossible to get around without the need to climb over things. My eyes settled on a stiff yellow chair, half panicked, because part of me feared I might be able to get through the sea of upturned filing cabinets, boxes, empty picture frames, cooking pots, typewriters. But it needs me. It's going to starve without my sacrifice. I think, maneuvering around upturned chairs and piles of trash. Now I know why my whole life I wanted to hurt myself. It's so simple. The mansion is somehow attached itself to me. It's dying and it needs me to help feed it. I want to burn and cut myself. Take Peyton's abuse because it likes to feed off of my suffering, misery, and despair. Somehow one of its meanie forms has been following me for years, microfeeding, and now it craves more, all of me. How knew this, I couldn't say. I just felt as though this was my story, a story as long as time, possibly even repeated multiple times over and over again, going down through the generations with only small variations in minor details. Shivering, I toppled across the kitchen. My eyes take in the sorry sight of wrenched open cupboard and empty drawers, the battered little stove. It's all so sad and lonely, I tell myself, fingering the top of a broken lampshade. The whole place is irreversibly trashed and dead inside. I can taste the anger and smell its rage at the world for forgetting about it. Please don't be mad at me. I quiver, sliding sideways through a broken doorway that has a striped shirt hanging on the back of it from a hooked nail. This door doesn't have a doorknob, I noted. Gradually, the place was growing harder to breathe in as I claw my way past a wretched back room, barricaded in stacks of garbage. You're going to be delayed. Hurry, hurry. The house screamed inside the back of my head. It hurts, I sobbed in return. Even the thought of me not being enough to save it made me wince. Beginning to cry at the pain, I try ripping away the trash and debris that blocks off my path. But there's so much of it that my attempts are nearly futile. Blindly, I kick cardboard cartons out of the way and shove around upside-down tables until the gloomy staircase looms up in front of me. Here is where the strongest pulls are coming from. So I ignore the little back laundry room and drag myself up the plain wooden steps, but I'm so weak that climbing the stairs is very taxing. They're half blocked off by a sheet of wood, but this doesn't stop me. Squeezing sideways, I make myself advance up each battered, mud-caked step, using the polished oak banister for support. But it's like climbing a mountain, and my legs start to grow heavier with the exertion. I feel animal crap crunch under my bloody bare feet, making me stifle a cough as the dark grime gathers thicker the higher I go. Wheezing on stale air, I finally reach the second floor and stop to catch my breath, dizzy because I haven't been able to breathe properly this whole time. Sickened by the smell of rotting walls, I lean against the hard wooden banister that surrounds the top of the stairs. I wonder what the house will do to me. Will it make me suffer? The first door at the top of the stairs sits open and I peek inside. The whitewashed window at the furthest end is broken, letting in a foul whiff of dank air. Stifling another fit of coughing, I examine the flowery papered walls, half turned yellow over time. Here too, the ceilings above the bare frame of a bed are badly falling inwards. I don't know why, but the stiff neglect and abandonment makes me want to scream. In the closet nearest to the door sits a broken water basin and an oily little washcloth. But the room's too full of junk to go inside any further, so I back away and cross the floor to the other row of doors, all open and hazy in a greenish tint. I feel like I'm walking inside of a fairy dream. I think vacantly, no longer caring about the world I move through, only of the idea I'm living in. My only purpose is to be used, devoured. My innocence is all that it craves, the soul inside me that keeps my heart beating and my blood flowing through my veins. A bookcase has fallen sideways along the short hallway, and I walk across tattered books that lay scattered beneath my feet. The next room I reach is piled so high in crap that I'm forced to climb up and over the shit again. But I don't mind the hardship, I think, because I'm lost in such a beautiful dream. My thin body's steadily doing all the work for me, climbing over broken lamps, across ripped-out chair stuffing and around car tires. Wood and damaged furniture sucked up into it all until I'm nearly part of the clutter. Nothing's here after all, I finally decided, but I need something to break me down into the floor. I agonized. I wanted someone to hold me still and crush out my will to go on. Light bulbs hung from spindly wire from the ceilings and flaking trim-lined walls lead me back out into the dingy blue hallway, where I once again felt the strong desire to be tortured alive and ground up into tiny bits. Across the broken bookshelf, I looked into what could have been a little girl's room, still wrapped in faded blue flowery paper. Her room wasn't so messy as the other bedrooms. It had a tiny white bare bed frame beneath a crumbling window, half boarded up with extra frames leaning against it. The room had an upturned table and piles of rags laying in stacks about the floor, so soiled you couldn't even make out what the floor even looked like. Crunching over crap in the hallway, I drew near to the last room at the end of the hallway. This one will take me, I tell myself, struggling over a chair that stands in my way, no doubt used to reach the attic. It's in here. Hurry. I make myself crawl on hands and knees over the rest of the stuff. The doorway is smeared brown in a dark black kind of liquid that drips down the walls and covers most of the floor. Am I really here at last? I ask myself. This room is the darkest one in the whole house, and I have to squint to see into its crimson depth. A glass door leans up against one wall, and there's a wooden trunk on the floor in the center of the room. And a great big heaving sound as if the back wall might be alive. I stop in the doorway and look up at the corner of the back wall. There's a cloudy black shade quivering as it observes me in the muffled darkness. Take me, I let out, with the last bits of strength that I possess. I know that it's Peyton. Somehow I can feel that it is him, but not fully Peyton. It's just a blurry fragment of the cruel entity. What are you waiting for? I howl, feeling the need to be seen growing unbearable inside. Suddenly I'm being viciously attacked. The gloom of nightmares strikes out, sending me crashing through the flimsy walls to land on top off the upturned bookcase. Take me, you fucking bastard. I shrieked, attempting to get up, holding out my hands for the thing to come back and nip at. Blindly I felt a sharp snap, as it took a taste of my open palms. Do it, I wailed, looking into the void of red walls black with turned up soot. Kill me. I know you want to feed, so do it, goddammit. I was a junkie, desperately craving my next big fix. More than anything, I wanted it to take the pain away and give me meaning. Mercilessly, the cold black air thunders into me a second time, then drags and sucks me straight back through the walls. Screaming out at the force, I feel myself sink right through everything to fall upside down for what seemed like an eternity. Further and further I fell. Then coils and still more coils of black wire begin to bind me, wrapped around and around my paralyzed body. But I'm not scared yet, and it knows this. Dimly I sense the house creeping out of its camouflage to observe me, making my limbs grow heavy as though I'm frozen, but its gaze cuts straight through the ice as if it's nothing. Slice, I whimpered as my clothes were torn off of me as the sharp wire begins to cut into my flesh. But I can't really feel it, even though it's drawn blood. Is that all you got? I screamed at the dark that held me. Blood dripped off of my bare legs and began to bead up onto my arms, as my body was pulled back and yanked forward, tangling me into the scary mass of black electrical cords and wires that hung in a great mess of tangles from the ceiling. Chains hung there too, swaying with the bodies of other long-gone victims. In shock, I looked over and saw his treasures, a bleached white skull caught helplessly in a mess of cords. There was a boy's severed leg and a doll's face next to that, just her head, that is. Blankly she looked back at me with empty, clear blue eyes. They were open wide with her long lashes drooping over them. The wires had been tightly wrapped around and around her throat to the point where her delicate porcelain neck had been broken. Her blonde curls, matted into a rat's nest of tangles, spilled down the back of her head. I blinked quickly, stunned, turning my head in time to be harshly struck. "Please just do it," I begged him in a tiny whisper, as a painful spasm of smarting cracks of electricity sent me swaying back and forth, my body going completely limp as a rush of dizziness washed over me. "Please," I screamed at it, as the entity of gray mold dropped me a couple of feet lower. Then the coils of black cord loosened, and I fell further down with a heart-wrenching crash. A wild cry rent from my throat. Another hard crack was administered, nearly missing my eye. Weakly, I looked into my tormentor's face and saw an endless sea of different faces, all writhing in a captive mass of leathery serpent-like bodies. "Peyton," I quivered, feeling him reach for me. "It's you, isn't it?" But his likeness was a smear of horror and a frenzy to eat. "It's always been you." I sniffed hard as the darkness took a vaguely human shape that almost moved like a robotic man. But somehow I still wanted him to finish me, squeeze me into his chest until I could feel him, but he wasn't a man, nor was he a monster. He was dark matter, teeth and claws. Peyton was raw, unfiltered energy, with a blast of emotions that could rip apart your soul by a single stab of his fingernail. I screamed as my body crashed through soggy wooden splinters and the vision was shattered. The bottom of the pit was encased in dark-colored kind of goo that resembled something close to pond sludge. I was standing upright, waist-deep in the stuff and beginning to hyperventilate. Around me, the atmosphere was mirror-like, but I wasn't myself anymore. I was dreaming, drowned in the puddle, huddled forward, my back striped in belt-lined whiplashes, my neck burned in angry bruises, my eyes staring back at me, pleading for something to come save me, stop it, but I couldn't. Suddenly the liquid turned and sloshed, and I felt myself begin to be digested. "I'm going to die," I think, distantly, regaining consciousness to tease me for a fraction of a beautiful second. Strangely, I found myself laying back on the floor on the wooden porch steps, just inside the doorway, as if I had never actually gotten any further inside. My face was half melted away, fused into the floor, and the entity was eating me alive. But I can't feel anything. In fact, all I could consciously focus on was a bittersweet sort of bliss, like the happiest I've ever felt, just compressed into a singular moment. I was so high I could almost float, weightless and free, caught up in a dream of rainbows and glittering glass, only all the glass was stabbed into me. I could see myself now from just a few feet away, or from the other side of the puddle, laying in a mess of dirty bones, and next to me is the dried-up, decaying remains of an older gentleman. He's wearing gold-rimmed glasses and shriveled clothes. "Grandfather?" I feel myself question in awe, immediately recognizing him from an old photograph I'd seen of him as a child. I knew that he was my grandpa, the missing father that had just wandered away so many years ago. There's the little girl's papa as well, fused to the house and mostly eaten away. Then my gaze stopped on a fresh body laying in the corner. "Father?" I attempted to say, but words can't be formed anymore, not when you don't own yourself any longer. But of course he's long since passed away. All of them are, like little helpless bugs caught up in a web they have been called out here and fed off of. But what really gets me is the placid smile frozen across their faces. Each of them died willingly, peacefully, as if on something they'd giving themselves up, as I am doing. Good night, I think. Suddenly I wake up again, jumping up abruptly in a dazed panic, unsure of where I am at first or what has happened. But my back hurts, and legs ache as if they've been forced up into a cramped position. My eyes widened in disbelief as a figure moves to help me up. How is this even possible, I wonder? "Welcome back," I hear a familiar voice say in a low voice. "Are you ready to get started?"